We're joined now by former presidential candidate, current Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. Mr. Secretary, thanks for joining us this morning. You know, the president got good reviews for his State of the Union, but our new poll shows that Donald Trump has the edge on critical issues like the economy, inflation, and crime. How do you explain that? How do you turn it around?
Well, I'm one of those who believes that President Biden deserves more credit for the historic economic results that he's delivered. Record job creation, unemployment that hasn't stayed this low for this long since before I was born. Most of us don't think that the stock market is an indicator of the economy, but if you do, because I know the former president does, hit an all-time high under President Biden, not under President Trump. But also credit doesn't accrue unless you go out and take credit and explain how these things were achieved. That's one of the reasons why I'm so energized by the president's State of the Union address, where he talked about the achievements that had come about on his watch and why, and then just as importantly, talked about the future. He didn't just talk about how he made sure that seniors only pay $35 a month for insulin. He reminded America that we could have that for all Americans. And that's part of his second-term agenda, and actually something we could have today if just a handful of congressional Republicans would change course and stand with us instead of with Big Pharma. So on issue after issue after issue, Americans agree with President Biden. But of course, it requires work to get that story out, especially when there's a fire hose of negativity talking down the economy and trying to change the subject from the president's achievements, which is just politics. But it's exactly why it's so important to tell the story right now.
Republican response came from Senator Katie Britt of Alabama. Let's take a look.
The free world deserves better than a dithering and diminished leader. Just ask yourself, are you better off now than you were 3 years ago?
You know, a majority of America are saying the answer to that is no. That's the classic Ronald Reagan question.
Yeah, 3 or 4 years ago, you couldn't get toilet paper. 3 or 4 years ago, we were in the middle of a pandemic that killed about 1 million people. When we took office, just to take a couple examples from the transportation sector, there had been 4 straight years of promises about an infrastructure bill that never came. Of course, President Biden delivered that in his first year, and it's contributing to manufacturing jobs and construction jobs around the country. Aviation, right now, one of our biggest challenges is making sure airlines can keep up with the demand. 3 years ago, the big question was whether America's airlines were going to go out of business because of the condition that the economy was in when President Biden inherited it. Now, I know those response addresses have to be written before the State of the Union is actually delivered, and I don't think they usually change them based on what actually happens during the address, but anybody who watched that address saw, not just in the substance, but in the delivery of President Biden's remarks, a leader who is in command, showing strength and clarity of vision.
But how can an 81-year-old incumbent be the candidate of change that's so critical in presidential elections?
Well, look at the changes that he's brought about. Take some of the issues that matter most to newer generations. Climate is a great example, right? He, I think, generously suggested that nobody in the chamber would disagree with him that climate change is real and a real problem. And yet I could hear snickering from behind me from some congressional Republicans who were saying they don't think it is a problem. So it's a good example of that saying that what matters most is the age of a leader's ideas. And, similarly, if you look at some of the issues that are especially important to younger generations, like LGBTQ equality, I appreciated that he renewed the call for the Equality Act. And then, of course, the issue, which I think affects all generations, of choice. Look, the last president, President Trump, kept his promise to end the freedom to choose in America. That's one of the few promises that he did keep. As a consequence, not only access to abortion, but access to IVF is now being interrupted in the United States of America. President Biden laid out a very clear vision, called on Congress to restore the right to Roe v. Wade, something he's very focused on doing.
In her speech, Britt also falsely implied that the violence encountered by a sex trafficking victim she met with was the fault of Biden administration policies. In fact, the crimes occurred in Mexico during the George W. Bush administration. That's not stopping the senator from standing by the story. What do you make of that? And with Congress paralyzed, what more can President Biden do on his own to secure the border?
I'll leave it to her to explain the falsehoods, but I think it illustrates the bigger issue. She's a United States senator, And the United States Senate right now could be acting to help secure the southern border. As a matter of fact, they very nearly did with negotiations that included very conservative Republicans and Democrats and had support from the White House, reaching a package that frankly involved tough compromises for all sides, something that the bases of both parties might not have loved, but that would have made a real positive difference, only for that to be killed by the chill effect that the former president put on congressional Republicans, telling them not to support anything that would represent a policy win for President Biden. Look, we have a very clear choice between congressional Republicans who seem to prefer that this issue remain bad so that they can attack the president over it, and those who would actually like to solve it or at least improve it and address it. I think that's the most important question that should be raised. And you mentioned that, this story that was suggested to be a reflection on President Biden turns out to have dated from the Bush administration and happened in a different country. One thing that gets me thinking about is since the beginning of the Bush administration, there have been 3 major bipartisan attempts to have comprehensive immigration reform or do something big and meaningful about the border. I think 2006, 2013, and now 2024. Will 2024 go down in history as yet another failed attempt at bipartisan compromise, or will congressional Republicans follow the lead of their own negotiators and the President of the United States and actually do something about it?
Donald Trump is taunting the president about debates. Think we're going to see them this year?
Look, I can't speak to the campaign side while I'm here as secretary. What I will say is that we've got a great story to tell as an administration. And just as you see the president hitting the road to tell that story, I know the cabinet will as well, and we're proud of it. I mean, no modern president has been able to deliver this kind of job growth, this kind of low unemployment, this kind of infrastructure delivery hasn't happened since Eisenhower. But again, look, the nature of our world, and certainly the nature of today's media environment, is people aren't just going to hand credit to the president. We need to be out there illustrating why this happened, and most importantly, making clear what this administration's agenda for the future is.
Secretary Buttigieg, thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.